Welcome to our third topic out of 14 topics in total, titled Ancient History Repeated. Part 1, the days of Noah. And Adam called his wife's name Eve because she was the mother of all living. Then the Lord God said, Behold, the man has become like one of us, to know good and evil. And now lest he put out his hand and take also of the tree of life and eat and live forever. Therefore the Lord God sent him out of the Garden of Eden to till the ground from which he was taken. So he drove out the man, and he placed cherubim at the east of the Garden of Eden, and the flaming sword which turned every way to guard the way to the tree of life. So Adam and Eve had to leave the garden, an act of grace. That's what we saw in the first topic. And God puts there an angel with a flaming sword in order to make sure that no man can enter the garden, and that way sin could become eternal. We read on. Now Adam knew his wife, Eve, and she conceived and bore Cain, and said, I have acquired a man from the Lord. Then she bore again, this time his brother Abel. Now Abel was a keeper of sheep, but Cain was a tiller of the ground. And in the process of time it came to pass that Cain brought an offering of the fruit of the ground to the Lord. Abel also brought of the firstborn of his flock and of their fat. And the Lord respected Abel and his offering, but he did not respect Cain and his offering. And Cain was very angry, and his countenance fell. Now what is the problem here? In 1 John it says, For this is the message that you heard from the beginning, that we should love one another, not as Cain, who was of the wicked one, that is the devil, and murdered his brother. And why did he murder him? Because his works were evil, and his brother's righteous. Why was Cain's sacrifice evil, whereas Abel's sacrifice was righteous? It says, Abel also brought of the firstborn of his flock, and that means of his sheep flock, because he was a keeper of sheep, and of their fat. And this is in harmony with what God had taught them. Now we saw in the first topic that God made garments of skin for Adam and Eve, and God obviously had to kill a lamb for this. And that is why Jesus is called the Lamb that is God, Lamb of God that is slain from the foundation of the world, because this slaughtered, this killed lamb is a symbol for Jesus dying at the cross right from the beginning. And Abel's offering was in accordance with that custom, with that lesson that God had taught Adam and Eve. And so with this offering, Abel showed that his hope and his trust was in the sacrifice of Jesus, the Lamb of God. And he knew that he was looking for the coming Messiah. Cain instead decided to do what he would like, that he wanted to do, and to build his own religion. And he showed no interest in religion at all. But Cain did. And that's why Abel is called righteous. And Hebrews says, By faith Abel offered to God a more excellent sacrifice than Cain, through which he obtained witness that he was righteous, God testifying of his gifts. And through it, he being dead still speaks. So Abel offered in accordance to God's ordinances, and thus showed that he was waiting for the promised Messiah. Now what this also is showing us, this whole story, that the way of worship matters. So it matters the way I'm worshiping God. Truth matters. It's important to God. Back to the Cain and Abel story. And Cain was very angry, and his countenance fell. So the Lord said to Cain, Why are you angry? And why has your countenance fallen? If you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin lies at the door, and its desire is for you, but you shall rule over it. Now God says to Cain, there is evil coming up in you, and you will have evil in your mind. Sin is desiring for you, sin's desire is for you, but you shall rule over it. He says to him, you are to strive against sin. And that's what we saw in the first topic as well. It's the inner battle. We are to fight against sin. Now we are to call for God's help in this. Absolutely. That's what we got to do. Otherwise, there's no chance for it to win that battle at all. But we are to rule over sin. That's what Cain had to do. That's what we have to do. There's no excuse for any of us. Now Cain talked with Abel his brother, and it came to pass, when they were in the field, that Cain rose up against Abel his brother and killed him. Then the Lord said to Cain, "Where is Abel your brother?" He said, "I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper?" And he said, "What have you done? The voice of your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. So now you are cursed from the earth, which has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. When you till the ground, it shall no longer yield its strength to you. A fugitive and a vagabond you shall be on the earth." And then it says, "Then Cain went out from the presence of the Lord and dwelt in the land of Nod on the east of Eden." Now, verse 16 is a very interesting verse. There's some deep symbolism in it, and we will have a closer look at it in a moment. For us, it's important to understand what's happening here. And this is that Cain turns his back on Eden. And that means he turns his back on Adam and Eve as well. And they are the remaining children. "And Cain knew his wife. She conceived and bore Enoch." Now, directly after this, after it is said that Cain is moving away from Eden and he's leaving Adam and Eve and their family. Now, Adam and Eve, they obviously had lots of sons and daughters, and we can be sure that Adam and Eve, they had more than just 3 children. Because, Eve was the first after the fall, and she had a very, very undegenerated body. So her body was full of strength, and for her, birth was surely way easier than it is for a woman today, for example. So they had lots of children, okay? And some went with Cain, others stayed with Adam and Eve at the Garden of Eden. And at least one daughter was moving with Cain. That's where he has his wife from. And right after this is told that Cain is leaving the home of Adam and Eve, his genealogy is listed. And this is what we read here. "And Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bore Enoch. And he built a city and called the name of the city after the name of his son, Enoch. To Enoch was born Irad, and Irad begot Mehujael, and Mehujael begot Methushel, Methushel begot Lamech, and so on and so forth." So he moves away from Eden, he moves east, and there he multiplies. The 2 lines of mankind. "Then Cain went out from the presence of the Lord and dwelt in the land of Nod on the east of Eden." Now, the symbolism in here is there are 2 lands named here, and one is the land of Eden and the other is the land of Nod. Now, land of Eden means land of pleasure, land of happiness. And Cain is moving away from that land of happiness, and he's moving towards the land of Nod, which means land of homelessness. Like he's moving away from God and is moving towards homelessness, inside him there is a total separation from God taking place here, and he's moving towards homelessness, meaning he's lost. Okay, that's what's going on here. Now, as I said, there are 2 genealogies now listed. The first, directly after this verse, the genealogy of Cain. And directly after the genealogy of Cain, there is the genealogy of Adam and Seth following. That is then going through down to Noah. Now, why does the genealogy not continue until Abram, like it does then later? And the answer is because Abram is not of interest now in this context here. And here's a thing that, especially in the first book of Moses, is something that we find at several places. When Moses is bringing up a genealogy, he is quite often doing it in order to lay the foundation for something that is following. You see this, for example, with the Table of Nations in Genesis 10. And after the Table of Nations, there is the story of Babel following. Now, it's not per hazard that the Table of Nations is before the Tower of Babel story, because the Table of Nations is needed in order to understand properly what's going on there in the Tower of Babel story. And we will see this, I think it's in the 7th topic, I don't know exactly, when we will talk about Babylon. And so it is here. We have 2 genealogies listed. First Cain's, then it's Adam and Seth's. And it's going down to Noah, because Noah is now then in the flood the important figure. But the point here that is illustrated here is that mankind is divided. We have Adam and Seth, they stay at Eden and they multiply and they become a group, quite large group. And you have Cain leaving Eden, moving away, and there he's multiplying and he's becoming a quite large group. And you have mankind is divided. And I have it summarized here. Cain's outward turning away from the Lord illustrates his inner rejection towards God. He moves away to the land of Nod, meaning as much as land of homelessness. Here already is looming within ancient mankind the deep division the Bible will depict more closely in the following chapters. One group, the descendants of Seth, stays at Eden, the land of happiness, in the presence of the Lord. The other group, Cain and his descendants, move eastwards to the land of homelessness, meaning into perdition. This early both spiritual and spatial separation gradually disappeared when the sons of the godly line of Seth started taking the daughters of the man of this world as wives. And we read this in Genesis 6. Now it came to pass, when men began to multiply in the face of the earth, and daughters were born to them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of man, that they were beautiful. And they took wives for themselves of all whom they chose. Now look again at the dynamic here, and we already know this dynamic from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And there we had Eve. She was seeing and saw that the fruit was beautiful, and then she took of that fruit. So here again, we have the power of the visual. What we see has a huge impact on us. Don't underestimate that. We have to control our eyes. What we see, what we look at, has an impact on us. Now, I have heard people say and wondering, why is it that they are taking the daughters of Cain because they are beautiful? Were the daughters of Seth not beautiful? But how can this be? I mean, the daughters of Seth, those are the ones that are faithful to God, and shouldn't they be the beautiful ones? And they are a bit confused, and I think the answer is quite simple. I want to illustrate it with two women. Now, taste and beauty is an issue of taste, certainly, but we just assume that both of these women are beautiful. The first woman on the left, she's smiling, it's very gently, very bright. So, of course, this is beautiful. And then we have another woman, and you're asking yourself, okay, what is this woman trying to tell me? Okay, this look like, this is like, I want you here and now. Okay, you could say this is beauty. Yes, this woman certainly is also beauty, but these are two different kinds of beauty. Now, one form of beauty is fitting for the public, whereas the other form of beauty is fitting for the private only, and only for a husband. And I think this is pretty much the thing that probably happens here. The daughters of Cain, they acted differently. They looked differently. They clothed differently. So they looked enticing. And so when the sons of Seth, they went to the cities of Cain and they went through the streets, they saw the daughters of Cain running around like this. And I mean, is this beautiful? Is this beauty? Yes, it is. Absolutely. Of course, this is beauty. There's nothing wrong with a beautiful body. Nothing at all. We can be sure when God created Eve, Eve had an absolutely beautiful body. In proportions, she had beautiful proportions. Certainly she had. Okay, God delights in beauty. So there is nothing wrong with this at all. Or maybe they went to a football match and they saw the daughters of Cain running around like this, and they said, man, they are so beautiful, I want to have one of them for me. They are so beautiful. When God made Adam, God made something practical. When God made the man, he made something practical. Okay, God created muscles, God created strength, he could work. When God created Eve, the woman, God created beauty. God created dignity. God created something majestical. There's really in a woman that knows how to clothe properly, there's really something majestical. There's really something majestical. So a woman is maybe to represent something of the majesty of God, of his dignity. And there really is a good portion of dignity and majesty in a woman that again knows how to act and clothe herself properly. And many of today's women are so far away from that as the East is from the West. It's almost like they have no dignity at all anymore. Okay, they really, there was a time when I had to go by train a lot, and I saw all these young women, or I mean, they were girls, teenagers. I mean, the worst are the girls. It appears to me like they are 14 or 15, 16. They're really clothed like, it's absolutely crazy. I mean, when I went to school 15 or 20 years ago, that's what I thought when I see them running around there half naked. And I saw them, I know we were thinking back then, when you saw a girl like this or a young woman like this, you thought, oh yeah, she's going to work, like a prostitute or something like this. But now today, these girls are going to school like this. Okay, this is absolutely crazy. But the tragedy is they have reduced themselves to a mere object of lust. That's what they did. They are nothing more than an object of lust for the eyes, and sometimes also for the body. Okay, so there's no dignity in this at all. And I'm making this point here, I'm spending so much time on this because this is really an issue for me, okay? Don't do that. Don't do that. For me, it's really, I really want women to understand that they have so much dignity in themselves. And they can show this dignity. They don't have to hide it behind sensual clothing styles, okay? But here's the point. So the sons of Seth, the sons of God, they see these daughters of Cain, how beautiful they are, and they start bringing these daughters into the camp of the righteous. And this first one did that, and then all the other sons of God, they saw these beautiful daughters running around there, beautiful women running around, and they start, so I want to have such a beautiful woman as well. Where did you get one of them? And he said, oh, you just have to go there 100 kilometers there over the hills, and there you find the cities of Canaan, and there they are really beautiful, and there are lots more. And so others did the same, and then you have more and more of these private beauty women running around there in the camp of the just. And, and then you have the daughters of God, and they see all the other sons of God, they are getting other wives, they are clothed like this, and they don't want to stay alone, so they start to clothe like the daughters of Cain. And because they want to be beautiful as well. And you see this in churches today as well. Okay, you see the exact same developments. Now, this caused a moral decay in the line of the righteous. It really corrupted the line of Seth. Now, the problem is that God spares this world for the righteous sake. If you, for example, what do I mean by this? If you, for example, look at the story of Sodom and what Abram is doing with God, he's discussing with God, and he's bringing God down to the point that God says, okay, if I find in Sodom 10 righteous people, I will spare the whole city. I will not destroy the whole city because of these 10 righteous persons. Now, God didn't find 10 persons here, but the point is, God is sparing sometimes whole cities, sometimes whole nations, because there is a certain amount of righteous people living in that city or living in that land. But what is happening now is that even this group of the righteous that is holding back God's wrath is now being corrupted. And now this group is breaking away, and that way the whole world is coming at the verge of being destroyed, at the verge of destruction. And so from verse 3 on, it reads, "And the Lord said, My spirit shall not strive with man forever, for he indeed is flesh. Yet his days shall be 120 years. Then the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And the Lord was sorry that he had made man on the earth, and he was grieved in his heart. So the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, creeping thing and birds of the air, for I am sorry that I have made them. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord." So now, 2,000 years after creation, God saw the necessity to intervene and to destroy mankind in order to rein in evil. But Noah found grace. Now, who is Noah? Noah is called a just man. He said he is perfect. Now, perfect doesn't mean he's without any sin. But perfectly basically means that he's totally submitted to God's will. Noah is also called a preacher of righteousness. So Noah was preaching to the world. He should warn the world. Now, he should not only warn the world with words, but also with works, with deeds. That's what God said to him. We read, "And God said to Noah, The end of all flesh has come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them. And behold, I will destroy them with the earth. Make yourself an ark of gopher wood." Now we jump to 21. "And you shall take for yourself of all food that is eaten, and you shall gather it to yourself, and it shall be food for you and for them," for the animals. Thus Noah did according to all that God commanded him. So he did. Here again you have this why Noah is called perfect, because God said something and Noah did it. Now, why should Noah build an ark? I mean, God could have spared him other ways. He could have put him on the highest mountaintop and let the waters just come to that top, or he could save him in a bubble and brought him through this. I mean, if you think that the ark saved Noah, in itself, we don't have a real understanding of what was going on during the flood. Okay, in the flood, the whole surface of the earth was turned upside down. So without God's protection, the ark would have been destroyed. So God could have saved them also in a bubble or something like this. Why did God want him to build an ark? And I think there are certain reasons he did that. And the first reason is God loves cooperation. And in this cooperation, man is responsible to do the possible, and God is responsible for the impossible. So also for our lives, we are to do what we can do, what we are able to do. And where we are coming to our limits, God will jump in and he will do the rest. Okay. And the second point is to enforce the message, to strengthen the message, to give it credibility. And this credibility is needed. Why was it needed? I mean, it should show that Noah was not moved by a mood or by a craving for admiration. Because the issue is that, the world before the flood very probably did not know any rain. Because what is rain for? Rain is there to water the soil and thus to water the plants. That's why it's raining. But we are explicitly told in the Bible that God solved this issue in the pre-flood world by a mist that was coming up from the earth. Genesis 2 verse 6. Now, where was this water coming from? It probably came from the fountains of the deep that broke up during the flood. From then, so God stored water under the surface of the earth. He had huge water storages, stores. And from there, obviously, the water was wetted and the plants that way were watered. Now, and these fountains of the deep, they broke up during the flood. And they are the main reason why the earth was flooded. Now, a heavy rain would have probably taken years to flood the whole earth. But these fountains of the deep, they broke up. And this huge amounts of water, they were later, stored in these huge oceans that we have today. That's where all that water from the fountains of the deep went. It's stored in the oceans. And this gives us maybe a kind of an idea what amount of water was stored down there in the deep. Now, man probably know about these waters beneath the soil. I mean, they saw that the earth is wet and they know, okay, this water did not come from above, so it must come from beneath. So they had an idea of water down in the soil or beneath the soil, but they certainly did not have an idea of the huge amounts of water that were stored down there. Now, why am I saying this? I'm just saying this because we are told in the Bible that at the end of times, this earth will be destroyed by fire from heaven. And could it be that, like in the flood, where there was water coming down from heaven, and this water joined the water that was coming up from the soil, and through this combination or this joining together, the whole world was turned into a sea of water? Could it be that at the end of times, when the water from heaven is coming, fire from heaven is coming down, that there's also coming up fire from the earth, or some kind of burnable material that will be then kindled by this fire from heaven, and that way, like in the flood, the whole world will be now, this time, not turned into a sea of water, but into a sea of fire. I mean, it will happen that way because Revelation 20 is telling us that the world will be turned into a sea of fire, a lake of fire. And Peter is telling us in 2 Peter 3 that the elements would melt. So God will do something that will create such a heat that the elements, the surface of this earth, will melt. Just for those that are interested in such sophisticated information. But my point here is, something like a flood was insane for the people before the flood. They have never seen rain coming down. They have never seen rivers going over the borders. And, and there you have, that's what Hebrews is saying. Hebrews says that Noah preached of things not yet seen. Hebrews 11. And now you have Noah building his ark on dry ground. Okay, and this ark was 300 cubits long, and I think this was something like 150 meters. Now, we assume that we take today's cubits for this. But we have good reasons to assume that people before the flood were way taller. Okay, in fact, it is assumed that they were 2 times to 2.5 times taller. Because if I remember correctly, they found bones in Turkey. That's somewhere there where the ark landed. And these were bones of man, and these men must have been 2 to 2.5 times as tall as we are. Okay, so if you take, and this was probably the people before the flood, and if you take such a cubit, you would have an ark that is 300, maybe up to 400 meters long. So this was a huge, huge boat, and he's building this on dry ground. And people would come to him, would say, "No, how are you planning to ever bring this into water?" And Noah will have told them, I will not bring this into water. God will do it. God will do it by a flood. And so this building an ark was a testimony. And probably people from everywhere, they came from everywhere of this earth. They came in order to look at this huge spectacle that he is performing there in building this ark. Now, the ark took quite a long time to be built. Okay, this was not done in a year. Nature was way better then, and the atmosphere was way better, so wood was probably way harder than it is today. So this was a long-taken process, and people came to look at it. And it must have made deep impression upon them when they saw the progress and when they saw it then finally finished. Okay, it must have made many of them feel uncomfortable with the question, okay, what's going to happen now? So, to make the long story short, it was a testimony. It served to underline his message. Now, to us is also given knowledge about things that will happen at the end of times. And like the building of the ark was also a preparation that Noah was to make for the events that would come, the question should be raised, is there maybe also preparation needed for us, for the things that are to come? Now, in his end-time speech, Jesus is warning us of the following events, some of the events. And you will hear wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. Now, Jesus is saying these things must come to pass. So it's not a question, will these things come? Maybe. Jesus is saying they will come. So it's not a question of how or if. It's only a question of when. For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. This sounds like a widespread war. And there will be famines, pestilences, and earthquakes in various places. All these things are the beginning of sorrows. So Jesus says there will be wars, there will be famines, there will be earthquakes, there will be pestilences. This whole world will be falling into chaos. And we saw through Corona how quickly the whole world can be turned upside down. And how quickly the food supply can become an issue all of a sudden. So if we believe what Jesus is saying, and we should believe, and if we believe that we are living in the end of times, which we have good reason to do, then maybe we should prepare ourselves for these events. Okay? Now we have the example of Joseph. I just want to bring it here, although it's kind of an excursus, but I want to have it here. And Pharao said to Joseph, I have had a dream, and there is no one who can interpret it. But I've heard it said of you that you can understand the dream to interpret it. So Joseph answered Pharaoh, saying, it is not in me. God will give Pharaoh an answer of peace. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, behold, in my dream I stood on the bank of the river. Suddenly 7 cows came up out of the river, fine-looking and fat, and they fed in the meadow. Then behold, 7 other cows came up after them, poor and very ugly and gaunt, such ugliness as I have never seen in all the land of Egypt. And the gaunt and ugly cows ate up the first 7, the fat cows. When they had eaten them up, no one would have known that they had eaten them, for they were just as ugly as at the beginning. So I awoke, and I saw in my dream, and then he says the same story with wheat, I think. Now Joseph is interpreting this dream. Indeed, 7 years of great plenty will come throughout all the land of Egypt. These are the 7 cows, fat cows. But after them, the seven years of famine will arise, and all the plenty will be forgotten in the land of Egypt, and the famine will deplete the land. So the plenty will not be known in the land because of the famine following, for it will be very severe. So this is the dream. And by the way, we will see this, that Joseph is saying to Pharaoh that God told him, gave him this dream in order to warn him, to warn Pharaoh of things to come. Now, the question is, what should Joseph now do with this knowledge? Should he pray? Very good idea. Absolutely. Maybe something else that he should do? Now, let us see what Joseph did and how he understood this knowledge that what he should do, because God gave that knowledge. Now therefore, this is Joseph still talking, let Pharaoh select a discerning and wise man and set him over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh do this and let him appoint officers over the land to collect 1/5 of the produce of the land of Egypt in the 7 plentiful years. And let them gather all the food of those good years years that are coming, and store up grain under the authority of Pharaoh, and let them keep food in the cities. Then that food shall be as a reserve for the land for the 7 years of famine which shall be in the land of Egypt, that the land may not perish during the famine. So Joseph understood that revelation of God was a call to action. And we should really ask ourselves, even like manner, when Jesus is giving us some knowledge about things that will happen in future, if this not maybe isn't a call for us to also become active and to prepare. Because we really have to ask the question, what is that knowledge for? And I tell you what this knowledge is not for. It's not for satisfying our curiosity. Now certainly it's for giving us peace and rest in Him and trust in Him, but it is also a call to action. It's meant to give us the possibility to prepare ourselves. Back to the story of Noah as well. And it was not, the building of the ark was a testimony. And like manner, our building of an ark can be a testimony as well, if we share to others why we are doing this, like Noah did. Now let us just have a look at how the days of Noah basically are. What were these days like? We don't know much. Jesus is telling us something about this in Luke 17. And as it was in the days of Noah, so will it be also in the days of the Son of Man. They ate, they drank, they married wives, they were given in marriage, until the day that Noah entered the ark and the flood came and destroyed them all. There are two basic needs of humans. The first is food, the second is sexuality. Now, both of them are given by God. Okay, God planted fruit trees in the Garden of Eden. He planted berries, bushes with berries, and all these things to eat. And God also put a woman at man's side. So both of it originated in God's will. So in itself, those things are not bad. So where is the problem? Now, the problem must lie in the use of these things, in the generosity. When Jesus charges the ancient world with things that were once introduced and blessed by the Creator Himself, this can only mean that they did not use those God-given possibilities in a proper way, but misused them. They, those God-given things, became the center of their thoughts and acts. It became the essence of their life, basically. And instead of eating and drinking with reason, there was gorging and boozing. In place of marriage lived out within the God's defined limits, there was sensuality, promiscuity, divorce, remarriage, polygamy, etc. It was a society built on the principle of lust. Then the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And we have to ask ourselves, what's our society like? Is it not quite close to what we just read about the society of Noah? Has our societies today, do we have a problem with eating and drinking? Do we have a problem with sexuality? I would say yes. Now Paul is warning us in regard to the end of times. He says, but know this, that in the last days perilous times will come. For men will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, unloving, unforgiving, slanderers, without self-control, brutal, despisers of good, traitors, headstrong, haughty, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, having a form of godliness but denying its power. And from such people turn away. Lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God. That's the principle of lust. Okay? He's saying that will be the society of the end of days. Now, the problem is that Paul is not talking here about the world, because for the world this would not be really unusual. The dramatic issue is that he is talking about Christianity. And we know this because he is talking about those people that have the form of godliness. So those people that appear to be Christians. So in the world before the flood, we have godless people. But the biggest problem was when God's people started to become like the world. And that is exactly what Paul is telling us what will happen at the end of days as well. And that's why it made such an emphasis, why it put such an emphasis on this corruption of Seth's line, because it will be repeated. The Bible predicts there will be a massive decay within Christianity. And we will have a closer look at these predictions in the following topic, topic 4, the love for the truth. We go one step further, the days of Lot. Jesus says about the days of Lot, likewise as it was also in the days of Lot. They ate, they drank, this we know already. This is obviously nothing unusual for the world. Men of this world have a problem with this, obviously, since ever. They bought, they sold, they planted, they built. But on the day that Lot went out of Sodom, it rained fire and brimstone from heaven and destroyed them all. Even so will it be in the day when the Son of Man is revealed. Now, for me, it's fascinating. Normally, with Sodom, we associate sexual immorality. Okay, we have words like sodomize and things like these. But the number one things that Jesus is associating with Sodom is eating and drinking, but buying, selling, planting, and building. Now, if we sum up, we could sum this up in the word business. People were after multiplying their possessions. That's where all their mind was about. They wanted to have more and more and more. Sodom was a place where you could get wealthy. So business and this striving for business, that was the problem of Sodom. It was just about wealth. Now, what about Lot? We have Lot basically serves as a negative example. And Lot saw all the plain of Jordan, that it was very well watered everywhere, before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt, as you go towards Zoar. Then Lot chose for himself all the plain of Jordan, and Lot journeyed east. And they, this is Abram and Lot, separated from each other. Abram dwelt in the land of Canaan, and Lot dwelt in the cities of the plain, and pitched his tents even as far as Sodom. But the men of Sodom were exceedingly wicked and sinful against the Lord. Now on one side, Lot saw the simple life on green meadows surrounded by hills and forests. So country living, this is the land of Canaan, country living. And on the other side, he saw the land's crowded centers for trade and business. And Lot realizes the possibility of getting wealthy. So he decided to move towards Sodom. Now, did Lot know the character of that city? We don't know, but probably he must have at least some knowledge. At least after a certain while living close to that city, he must have known that the city is exceedingly wicked. Now, nevertheless, it says that Lot pitched his tents up to the city, so he was not living in the city, within the city. But if we read, for example, Genesis 14, we see that Lot, although he must have realized that this city is exceedingly sinful, he made the choice to leave his tents before the city and build or buy a house within the city. And this had catastrophic impact on his family. Now God intends to destroy Sodom, and the angels are coming in order to draw Sodom out of to draw Lot out of Sodom. Then the man said to Lot, these are the angels, have you anyone else here, son-in-law, your sons, your daughters, or whomever you have in the city? Take them out of this place, for we will destroy this place, because the outcry against them has grown great before the face of the Lord, and the Lord has sent us to destroy it. So Lot went out and spoke to his sons-in-law who had married his daughters, and said, get up, get out of this place, for the Lord will destroy this city. But to his sons-in-law he seems to be joking. So like Noah, Lot was called to warn the people, but the people laughed at him like it was in the days of Noah, because they have never seen something like this. Fire from falling down from heaven. Are you mocking? You're joking? What's wrong with you? When the morning dawned, the angels urged Lot to hurry, saying, arise, take your wife. So Lot is hesitating. He doesn't want to leave Sodom. Take your wife and your 2 daughters who are here, lest you be consumed in the punishment of the city. And while he lingered, so Lot is still lingering, the man took hold of his hand, his wife's hand, and the hands of his 2 daughters, the Lord being merciful to him, and they brought him out and set him outside the city. So it came to pass, when they had brought them outside, that he said, escape for your life. Do not look behind you, nor stay anywhere in the plain. Escape to the mountains, lest you be destroyed. So Lot clung to the city, to Sodom, to the wealth, to his possessions, to the easy life he could have there. And the angel finally had to grasp him and had to pull him out of the city. And they said to him, go to the mountains. And then Lot says, please, no, my Lord. Indeed, now your servant has found favor in your sight, and you have increased your mercy, which you have shown me by saving my life. But I cannot escape to the mountains, lest some evil overtake me and I die. See now, this city is near enough to flee to, and it is a little one. Please let me escape there. Is it not a little one? And my soul shall live. So Lot is looking for compromise, and he's offering a small city. I could go to a small city. This would be probably today more like a small or a medium-sized village. And, it ends like that actually God wanted to destroy Sodom, but God spares that city so Lot can dwell there. But later, Lot moves, obviously, to the mountains, because that's where the story with his daughters, that they are sleeping with their father, is taking place. So obviously, we don't know why, but he's moving to the mountains then. Now, there's actually a very interesting dynamic in this whole story. We have Abram, he was to leave Ur, this is city life, and he was to go to Canaan, this is country life. Okay? And then we have Lot, and he has the same story. Okay? He's coming out from Ur, city life, and he's then in Canaan, this is country life. But then Lot decides he wants to go to Sodom. This is city life. But God is calling him out of Sodom. He says, go to the mountains, have country life. But Lot says, oh, can I not go to Zor? This is a small city. So Lot says, I want to have city life. And God says, okay, then have city life. And finally, Lot is then leaving the city and he's having country life again. So God wants us to have city life. Okay, just a short addition to the second topic. Now, the influence, and that's what I said earlier, of this surrounding in Sodom on Lot's family was absolutely destructive. And we see this in Lot's daughters. I mean, they were so corrupted morally that they finally slept with their father in order to have descendants. Okay, they made them drunk, and then they made him drunk, and then they slept with him. Or so to say, they actually raped him. So this is something Lot absolutely underestimated. Lot's example. Thus was the end of a pious man's life. He lost his wife, all his possessions, almost his life, and finally ended up impregnating his own daughters. His heritage were two nations who by their influence again and again would cause God's chosen people to sin and even attack them. So this is talking about the two sons that were born from the two daughters after they had slept with Lot. This is Moab and Ammon. All this is basically the result of one single, apparently petty decision, namely moving to Sodom. In contrast to this stands Abram. He knew to separate his family from the harmful influences of the ancient world as well as possible. He also made a mistake that had its consequences when he agreed his wife's counsel to take her maid Hagar and have a child with her. Also in his family, normal human weakness was seen, but not to the tainted behavior of Sodom. His heritage finally is the people of Israel that for hundreds of years was the keeper of salvation and true worship, and out of whose midst came he who takes away the sin of the world. In Scripture, Lot is presented to us as being righteous. So despite all this, he obviously was still able to save his eternal life. That he will see his wife and his daughters in the heavenly kingdom again, though, from the biblical report is very improbable. Being himself a righteous, he was not able to compensate with his piety the destructive influence the social context had upon his family. Shaped and educated by the godless life they witnessed anew every day, his wife and his daughters chose a way that might have led them into perdition. So that's the tragedy of Lot. And that is why Lot is set for us as a negative example, how we should not choose our dwelling place. Lot chose his dwelling place based on, the perspective, based on the possibilities of wealth and easy life. And how often this is our criteria to choose our dwelling place, to choose a dwelling place for our children. But God has completely different criteria. He wanted Abraham and Lot to have country life. He wanted him and his children, their children, to have country life. That's the life according to God's design. A lesson for us. It's God's warning to us. We are changed by beholding. We are shaped by the social setting, the social surroundings. It has an impact on us. And it is a call to the believers of the last days to separate from a sinful environment. And we read about this in Revelation 18. Babylon the Great is fallen and has become a dwelling place of demons, a prison for every foul spirit and a cage for every unclean and hated bird. For all the nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. The kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth have become rich through the abundance of her luxury. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, lest you share in her sins, and lest you receive of her plagues. For her sins have reached to heaven, and God has remembered her iniquities. So here is the call to not fall into sin. Now this happens way more subtle, way more subliminal than we think. And this is a point where many Christians go astray, because they underestimate this very subtle influence of sin. It goes step by step. It's a slow process. It's like Peter is saying, the devil is going around like a roaring lion, and he knows how to do it. He knows that he has to lead people away from God step by step, and has to corrupt them step by step. We are called to not share in her sins. And this is talking about, I think I said it in a previous topic, about the system Babylon that is set up at the end of the world, and with all the sins that are practiced on the world that is then, in that world then, and we are not to share in these sins. And these sins have reached to heaven. So this is a clear reference to Sodom. There is the cry of the sins reached to God. And like in Sodom, like with Sodom, God's judgment will come, especially over cities. And there will be a special presentation on this. We will have one. So it's a call to believers of the last day to separate from the sinful environment, mentally and spiritually, but also physically and geographically. Okay, Lot's history is not to be repeated within our families. And now I have a sentence here. Lot was pious enough to not reject the warnings of God, but he was not pious enough to show sudden and decisive obedience. So when the angel said, leave that city, and Lot would have shown decisive action, he could have saved at least his wife's life. But his hesitation and that he was so hesitating had also its impact on his wife. There's a huge lesson in this for us as well, especially for us as husbands. As men, we are the leaders of the family, and we have to show decisive obedience to God's command and to God's counsel. If we are hesitating, it will have a destructive effect on our family as well. But if we are seeing, for example, that God wants us to leave the cities, that God wants us to leave in the country, to leave the sinful environment, although it might hurt. The life in the city is the easy life. You can get everything you like, and it's a life of pleasure and ease. And life in the country, in some points it's more difficult. But nevertheless, we are to show decisive obedience as men. We are the leaders. And if we do show decisive obedience, in the very most cases, the family will follow. But if we hesitate, our family will start hesitating as well. So as husbands, as men, as fathers, we have the responsibility to be good leaders, not like Lot. Also in choosing the dwelling place for our families. Okay, that's very important. So, why should we build an ark? Well, it's a way of life according to God's design. That's what we saw in the last topic. With this topic, we add the second point of 7. It's leaving the sinful environment. That's what the Bible is calling us. And this especially means leaving cities. Because the nature of a city is to concentrate. Okay, you're concentrating power, you're concentrating resources, influence. But the things you do also concentrate is you're concentrating sin. That is the great problem of cities. So leaving the sinful environment means leaving cities. Now, this can also mean leaving a large village. Okay, it depends on the place where you're living. Okay, but this is the second point: leaving the sinful environment. Now we go to the last part of this series and this topic, and this is the days of the Son of Man. As it was in the days of Noah, so will it be also in the days of the Son of Man. They ate, they drank, they married wives, they were given in marriage until the day that Noah entered the ark, and the flood came and destroyed them all. Likewise, as it was also in the days of Lot. They ate, they drank, they bought, they sold, they planted, they built, but on the day that Lot went out of Sodom, it rained fire and brimstone from heaven and destroyed them all. Even so will it be in the day when the Son of Man is revealed. In that day, he who is on the housetop and his goods are in the house, let him not come down to take them away. And likewise, the one who is in the field, let him not turn back. Remember Lot's wife. So for Noah's time, it was characteristic that was eating and drinking, or gorging and boozing, promiscuity, principle of lust. Okay, so remember the text, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God. That's what Paul is telling for the end times. Now, this is true for Christianity at the end of times, according to Paul's text. Then it is even more true for the non-Christian society, okay? From the days of Lot, we have, again, gorging and boozing, business, gain of wealth. Now, we have to look for these things at the end of time. I believe in living with things like these. Now, we don't look what's going on in higher classes, okay? Because we have promiscuity in higher classes of this society, in the political ranks, we have it, okay? So, I mean, if you're taking, for example, pedophilia, I mean, if you go to the ancient kings, they had a problem with pedophilia. They had their boys, and, you know, and times have not changed. And you even have it today. Okay, just to if you, for example, talk about Marc Dutroux or something like this. So even today, in the higher classes of society, in the political ranks, there is a huge problem with pedophilia. And I don't know why, but this is a problem of people of power somehow. And yeah, but we do not look at this, because that's not what Jesus is talking about. He's not talking about the higher class. He's talking about you and me, normal social life. He's talking about the general social conditions about you and me. So, eating and drinking. So this is talking about in Germany about people that have too much weight, basically. And here it says that 67% of men and 53% of women in Germany are overweight. And here's a statistic, now this is all in German, that's showing you how the development is in certain countries over the last 25 years. And this is talking about the body mass index. So it's not about overweight here now, but this is about obesity. And the body mass index is the criteria for this. And the body mass index is classified in normal, and overweight, and obesity. And you can calculate the body mass index by dividing your weight through the height in square. I mean, you can do the math. And now there are people that are, you know, and I have written here, so you have obesity when you're 1.80 meters tall and you weigh more than 100 kilogram. Now, this is true for the general man. Okay, for the general man. Now, I know there are some people that have very strong body. They are by genes. They are a little bit more, not fat, but they have a little bit more body mass just by gene. Typically, it's muscles. And there are people that are, you know, more like me, that are more lean, if that's the right word. I don't know exactly. So, but this is talking about the general person. Okay, if you are 1.80 meters and you weigh more than 100 kilogram, you are suffering obesity. So, and here you see the development that is taking place, and you see that with most countries, or most of these countries that are listed here, over the last 25 years, you have at least a doubling in the percentage that has obesity. And in some countries, it's even 3 times as much. So we are eating too much. Okay, we are eating too much. And here it says Germany is getting thicker and thicker. Only 40% of the population are counted to be normal weight. And they say it's because oftentimes it's said by people, oh, these are my genes. And they say genetics play a role at maximum of 5%. And the rest is lifestyle factors. And what they are saying is that the great problem that we today have is that food is available everywhere. And since food is available everywhere and all the time, we eat almost everywhere and almost all the time. And I find it fascinating that for old people, many of them, and I saw this, for example, with the grandfather of my wife, when he was here at our house and building a little bit, and he was offered to eat something, to have something in between. He was looking at his watch and he said, oh, no, it's not yet lunchtime. You can give it to me at lunchtime. So it was 3 meals for him. There was breakfast, there was lunch, and dinner. And sometimes there is this meal between lunch and dinner where you drink coffee and eat maybe a piece of cake or something like this. But it was eating based on principle and not on lust. Okay, that is the great difference. Today we are eating based on lust. You know, you're walking around the cities and they say, oh, what can we do? Oh, let us just eat something. Oh, okay, we eat something. You're eating something, then you're going around, walking here and walking back and forth. And 3 hours later, you don't know what to do. Oh, what can we eat? Oh, look, there's a China restaurant. Let us eat something. You're eating, drinking, partying, and this is what you're doing. So we have way too much to eat at hand, and that's why we eat too much. And, you know, this is the great absurdity of this world. We have one part of this world's population that is dying because they are eating too much. And we have another part of this population on this earth that are dying because they're eating too little. So everything is totally out of balance. So one have too much, the others have too little. Now, people realize this and they are trying to distribute wealth and something like this, and they know we have to do something, and that's why they are coming up with concepts like redistribution, and which is basically actually what they are planning, a kind of an international socialism. But that's a different topic we will also have a short look at. Now, what about promiscuity? Here's an article, updated estimates of number of non-monogamous people in US. And here the writer is saying, in the previous blog I explained the challenges of estimating the number of polyamorous people, including who to count and how to count them. Since then, scholars have tackled these challenges and came up with some surprising results that document the numbers of people involved in consensually non-monogamous relationships in the United States. Now, what is a consensually non-monogamous relationship? Is any relationship agreements in which the partners openly agree to have more than one sexual or romantic relationships. Now that's what we are talking about. This is not just 2, but 3, 4, I don't know how many. In this article it says, using 2 separate samples based on the US census, Hoppett and colleagues found that fully 1/5 of the population of the United States, 21.9% in the first sample and 21.2% in the second sample, has engaged in consensual non-monogamy at some point in their life. So more than 20% of the people of the United States, they had more than one partner. So I don't know how it's called, a throuple or, something like this. Number remarkably stable across many categories. That's what they are saying. Also, age, race, social class, religion. That's also very interesting. I mean, of course, if you take, for example, religion and you have Islam, you have polygamy in Islam. But it's interesting. And they say, in practical terms, that means no matter where you live, how old you are, your race, or what kind of religious or political affiliations you have, at least 1 in 5 of your friends, neighbors, family members, or co-workers has tried swinging, had a threesome, or been in an open relationship of some sort. So do we have a problem with sexuality in our times? 5 to 4% of the population of the United States currently involved in a CNM relationship. So a consensually non-monogamous relationship, I don't know exactly. Others study the same ratio for Canadians. So 5% are currently doing swinging and changing the partners on agreements. Okay, so this time you have my wife and next time I have yours, and and something like that. While that might sound like a small number of people, it is larger than the entire bisexual, lesbian and gay population combined. So do we have a problem with sexual immorality in our times? Now, this was a interview they made in Germany, and they asked, could you imagine to be together with more than one partner? Okay, that's basically the same thing what we just read in the article. And 3% of the population they asked in Germany, they said, yes, I already had that. Okay, we had a threesome and something like this. And 12% said, yes, I could imagine to have something like this. And 85% said no. Now, and then of course we have divorce rates. Okay, they are, in Germany they currently are 40%. Around 2003 they were, I think, 60%, 55%. I don't know what happened there, but okay, it's reduced. Now in Spain and Luxembourg, Spain is interesting because it's very Catholic. There's 60%. Now the problem is with sexual aberrations. It's like an abyss without a bottom, and God will visit the cities. And one of the reasons he will do that is because of sexual immorality. These sins are really crying to heaven in our cities. They really are. And if you think, for example, also Ashley Madison. Okay, this is, their slogan is life is short, have an affair. So this is a platform that is offering married people, or wants to offer married people, the possibility to have an affair. And so life is short, have an affair, and it's for married people. You see the woman, she has this marriage ring, So this is not for singles. This is for married people that want to have, a adventure. Okay, they want to try just for one night, another woman, another man. So there is a platform on this earth that is trying to help people to commit adultery and to cheat their wives, their husbands. And this shall be, of course, it's trying to keep everything secret, okay? Of course, this is happening in secret, but it's absolutely crazy. When I came across this, I thought okay. And so they're making advertisement. Life is short, have an affair. So you on the highway, you have these huge signs, you can read it, life is short, have an affair. And here's an article from the vocative, the country with the most Ashley Madison adulterers per capita. And there it says, Canada is home to the most Ashley Madison adulterers per capita. This is what we just saw, this platform that is helping others to commit adultery. So it says Canada, it's 6.26 accounts per 100 inhabitants. This is 6.26%. United States is 5.11. Australia, 4.51 inhabitants. Now, what you have to consider, you may say, okay, this is not much, but what you have to consider is it has a certain class it addresses. Okay, it's not for the whole population. It has a certain class it addresses. And these are people that are among the relevant age. And this is probably between 20 and 60 years old, and the married people in this age. So it's maybe, I don't know, 50%, maybe. So if you say in the relevant age of 20 to 60 years, there's maybe 50% of our population. And of these 50%, it's addressing the married ones. So it would come, so these 6.26, for example, for Canada would mean that maybe 10 to 15% of the married people would be in some way involved in this thing. And this is a number that is really shockingly high. Now, and here you see the Ashley Madison users, so that these are the accounts that have United States 25.5 million, Brazil 10.3, United Kingdom 2.3 million, and so on and so forth. Now, they said they had in 2019 had 65 million accounts. And this number, through the Corona crisis, they said they had a massive increase in numbers. I mean, that's pretty, you can very imagine this. I mean, if people are very limited in what they can do, they are seeking for something else that they can do. And one of the things they could do is something like this. Now, if you just look at the numbers and you say you have 25 million accounts for the United States with a population of 330 million. So this is, I mean, it's not, I don't know exactly, I have not calculated, maybe it's 8% or something like this. Now they are also fake accounts, okay? So people that are trying to hurt you, they will create an account for you on that platform and then make it kind of public or something like this. And so they are also fake accounts. But nevertheless, as I said before, you have 10 to 15% of the married people are engaged in this issue. And if you say, okay, half of those are fake accounts, it's still 5 to 7.5% of the married people. And this is way too much. This is way too much. This is still incredible. Okay. The Bible is saying, for this you know that no fornicator, unclean person, or covetous man who is an idolater has any inheritance in the kingdom of Christ and God. Marriage is honorable among all, and the bed undefiled. The marriage bed is to be undefiled. But fornicators and adulterers God will judge. And there you have even signs like this, where they say, thou shalt commit adultery. I mean, how openly anti-God can a society become? It's really unimaginable. This world is so steeped in sin and we have no idea what's going on. I say we just see the tip of the iceberg, if that word exists. Just see the tip, okay? And there's so much more attached to it that we do not see, that is hidden. But God will, I believe God will not much longer stand back and watch. I think he will intervene like a Lot's story, and he will visit certain cities. Like he visited the cities of the plain. Okay, it's not just the judgment on Sodom. It's the judgment against Gomorrah. And 2 other cities were destroyed as well. So there were 4 cities destroyed because they were so sinful. And I think we will see this again. God will visit certain cities because of the sins that are in there. Now I want to bring up this slide again, because it's very important for me. And this is the lesson for us, the negative example of Lot. A call to the believers of the last days to separate from the sinful environment, mentally, spiritually, but also physically and geographically. And this is especially of importance to families that have children. Now, it's important for all, but for parents with children, it's absolutely important. Lot's history is not to be repeated within our families. It must not be repeated. Revelation 18. The call is, "Come out of her, my people, lest you share in her sins and lest you receive of her plagues." First comes the sharing in her sins, and then the plagues come. So we are to leave the sinful environment, lest we share in the sins that are practiced there, and we fall prey to God's judgment at the end of times. For her sins have reached to heaven, and God has remembered her iniquities. This world, and especially the cities, they have become like Sodom. And we are to separate ourselves from these surroundings. So again, why building an ark? It's a way of life according to God's design, and we are to leave the sinful environment. For closing this topic, Romans 13. The night is far spent, the day is at hand, the day when Christ will return. Therefore, now, what is our conclusion? If we know that the day of Christ is at hand, what should we do? Therefore, let us cast off the works of darkness, and let us put on the armor of light. Let us walk properly as in the day, not in rivalry and drunkenness, not in lewdness and lust, not in strife and envy, but put on the Lord Jesus Christ and make no provision for the flesh to fulfill its lust. This is a call for us to walk properly, to walk in the light, like Paul is saying it here, to break with sin, to totally break with sin. Now, I don't know where you are standing, but I know something very certainly and surely, you will also have to struggle with sin in some area of your life, and we all have. And it is absolutely important that we break with sin, that we completely throw it out of our lives, and even more, like Paul is saying here, that we see that the day is at hand. So let us cling to the Lord Jesus Christ with all our hearts, with all our might, with all our strength, with all that we have and all that we are. Let us commit to Him, to His cause, and let us lay aside all sin. So the next topic we will talk about is the love for the truth. And there we will talk about the decay that will go on in Christianity at the end of times, what the Bible is predicting, and what we are to do in order to get safe through this time. So make sure you watch this video also, and God bless.